The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to Friday morning, September 25. And of course, thank you once again for joining us for our California, Nevada PGA chat. We thank our colleagues in the Southern California section, Executive Director, Chief Executive Officer Tom Addis, Assistant Executive Director, Chief Operating Officer Nikki Gatch, Section President Tony Latendre, Bryce Seaver. Bryce keeps us on the air along with Tyler Miller, and certainly our Northern California PGA leadership president, Dee Moriarty, and Caitlin Doyle, who again make sure this end is working. So, a couple things in the news, and then we'll get to our speakers. We have a tremendous lineup today. Things to keep in mind. Thanks so much to CAL FIRE and all of the firefighters throughout the state of Washington, throughout the state of Oregon, who are battling these blazes, which are now in the millions of acres. And, we pray for their safety and the fact that they keep us safe on a continuing basis. And as we were just talking for a moment, there's an expectation of high winds this weekend. So everyone be safe, and let's hope that it doesn't turn out that way, because certainly that is one of the larger factors in the containment and control and extinguishing the blazes. Now, we also acknowledge the loss of Justice Ginsburg, and in our PGA family, the unfortunate loss of Doug Evans this past week, who was the Northeastern New York PGA section tournament director, who totally unexpectedly passed away this week. So our thoughts and prayers to all our families and friends, their families and friends, and fellow professionals, and certainly anyone personally known to you. Our panelists today we're very grateful. State Assemblyman Phil Ting is with us. Assemblyman Ting, thank you for being here. Caddie Now founder and CEO Dave Cavassa. Dave, thank you for joining us this morning. And we have our platform, the basis from which we work, the Southern California Golf Association Director of Government Affairs Craig Kessler, and Assistant Director of Government Affairs Kevin Fitzgerald. So Craig and Kevin, again, thank you for being with us. President Moriarty is not able to join us this morning, so this time I'd like to toss it to our colleague, Executive Director and Chief Executive Officer of Southern California, Mr. Tom Addis. Tom?
Good morning, everybody. I won't take a lot of time because we'd love to hear what Assemblyperson Ting has to say, as well as Dave and as usual, Craig. Craig will talk about this a little bit later, but well, it's not a but, it's a good thing. With our rounds being up as much as they are in some places, very high, but on a national average into August of just above 20%, which is incredible. People are recreating, which was the full intent of the opportunity to have golf courses opened and available. Outdoor recreation is so important to everyone today, and we're very, very happy that golf has had an opportunity to play a very, very large part in keeping everybody healthy. So that's really, really good. One of the challenges I believe we're going to have going forward is sustaining that. We don't know when the higher numbers will diminish. We hope not. But one of the key initiatives we're going to be looking at in the future is just keeping that going, keeping people engaged, keeping people on the golf course so they can stay healthy and enjoy the game of golf as it's intended to be enjoyed, and with everyone, with every family and every person. So I think we need to keep that in mind, along with the safety of everyone. And as Len said, really keeping our thoughts with all of the firefighters and the communities out there that have been challenged with the fires in California, Southern California. They're getting close. The one fire, the El Dorado fire, is nearly under control. And then the Bobcat fire is still spreading, but about 30% controlled. We're concerned about the high winds down here in Southern California if they appear this weekend. especially for that fire and keeping the community safe in that regard. Fortunately, no golf courses or facilities have been touched by the fires yet, and we don't believe they will. But our thoughts and prayers and support for our firefighters and all on the front lines, and thank them all. So with that, Len, we'll hear from President Latendre later in this meeting, and back to you. And thank you, everybody, for being here.
Thank you, Tom. And now I'd like to introduce Assemblymember Phil Ting. Assemblymember Ting was elected to the State Assembly in 2012, representing the 19th Assembly District, which spans the west side of San Francisco, as well as the communities of Broadmoor, Colma, Daly City, and South San Francisco. Assemblymember Ting is focused on economic recovery while also continuing progressive policies that protect and expand opportunity for all, equal rights, and environmental preservation. Because of his experience in the financial sector and as the San Francisco Assessor Recorder, Assemblymember Ting has become a leading voice on California's finances, currently serving as chair of the Assembly Budget Committee. Assemblymember Ting is a graduate of UC Berkeley and Harvard University John F. Kennedy School of Government, began his career in public service as the executive director of the Asian Law Caucus. And in 2005 was appointed Assessor Recorder of San Francisco by then Mayor Governor Newsom, where he closed a 5-year assessment backlog and brought in $290 million in unpaid property taxes to the city. So Assemblymember Ting, good to see you again. I'm grateful we had a chance to talk a little bit during the PGA at Harding Park. So welcome, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on how the city perceived the success of the PGA Championship at Harding Park and everything that led up to it, and what it means to golf, particularly in environments such as the state of California, Northern California, which is not unknown to hosting championship venues. So welcome.
Well, thanks so much. Thank you for everybody for joining us today. Really appreciate the warm introduction, Len, and it was great to see you at Harding Park. I think that let me just thank everybody on the PGA call just for their participation in this championship. Really, the championship gets put on by your amazing association, and you know how many years in advance it has to get planned. And I was there when it first got announced. I think it was like 5-6 years ago, or was it 8 years ago? I forgot exactly how many years, but I was there when it got announced back then, and was so excited that a major championship was getting brought to a municipal golf course. And I think it really, kind of what Tom said, one thing I know that the PGA, the USGA, and the PGA Tour know, in order to ensure that golf remains popular, they have to figure out how to highlight many of the amazing public golf courses, because that's what most people in this country play, the public golf courses that they have access to, and really make sure that those courses get highlighted in these different venues and in these different championships. I think the city was incredibly thankful to be able to host the 2020 PGA Championship. We were very concerned when it got rescheduled, and we were hopeful that we could even host it in August. Obviously, you all recall in March when everything got shut down, we weren't even sure if we could host it in August. I know that there was, for a second, a talk about potentially changing venues, but I'm so thankful that we didn't change venues. We think the championship went off amazingly well. And given the timing of so few sporting events that were occurring at that particular time, I think the viewership was off the charts. I think people across the country watched an amazing tournament. I think the fact that you saw that 7 people were tied on the back 9 for the lead, causing an amazing amount of lucky enough to be on the host committee. So I was there, like Len, and I was able to watch Colin Morikawa and that final round, watched his chip shot, which was incredible on 14, and obviously that tee shot on 16 that'll probably be seen as one of the best tee shots in PGA Championship history. But really what it meant to San Francisco is while we weren't able to sell the tickets and attract the level of tourism that we normally would have, the 30 or 40,000 people would have come to the event, we were able to highlight San Francisco. That's one of the reasons we were so proud to host it, is all the shots on TV. I didn't get to see much of the TV coverage, but all the amazing shots on TV, and the city looked phenomenal and the course looked phenomenal. And I think if you had told people across the state or really across the country that this was a municipal golf course, I don't think people really would have believed it, given the condition, the playability, how difficult the course looked. The fact that after 4 days, the final winner, I think he scored in at -11 or -12, I forget exactly, but that the course played extraordinarily tough. And so, we're extraordinarily proud to host the venue. Obviously, we're welcoming back the PGA Championship to the Olympic Club, as well as the U.S. Women's Open and the Ryder Cup at all those venues. And I think what's very exciting is there was a discussion of the President's Cup coming to Harding Park, but that might get usurped because there could be a regular PGA Tour event happening at Harding Park on an annual basis, which would be even more exciting. So that would add a public course to the PGA Tour, into the PGA Tour schedule, which would be, I think, extremely exciting. I think this is a really exciting time for golf. There was so much support in the Bay Area and for Harding Park and for this PGA Championship. It was a huge team effort. I think the only sadness came from not being able to host the thousands of visitors, but we saw it as a huge benefit to San Francisco, and it really justified the significant expense the city took to remodel the venue. We're very thankful that Sandy Tatum convinced the city to do that, and that he worked with the PGA Tour to ensure that there be a number of tournaments at Harding Park to be able to recoup those costs. And we really hope that potentially that could be a model for other venues to come. So again, thank you so much for just letting me be here today. I know Len mentioned there might be a couple questions that he might want to ask, or you may want to ask, and happy to sort of take any questions that you have. But it was such a wonderful relationship between the city, the PGA, the PGA, just incredible championship. We were so proud to be able to work together on it.
Thank you, Assemblymember Ting. And I don't see any question at the moment, so let me toss this to you. What discussions, if any, with the PGA just completing, are going on in terms of, there's always a debrief after an event like this, what went well, what can we tweak, and so on. Those types of discussions, and of course, the big one, which is the fan discussion, totally numbers driven in terms of COVID cases. And Governor Newsom has always been, very forthcoming with sharing the information. Anything come out on the horizon just before, session ended? It's about a month ago that the legislative session came to an end, or any conversations that are going on now in light of all the events that you mentioned, the Women's Open next year, and then the possible tour event, and then the PGA back in 28 and such. What's on the short-term, kind of long-term horizon in those conversations?
I think it's a great question. I think that in terms of the golf industry, golf is going to continue to be a great recreational option during this time of COVID. We believe, given what we're looking at now and when a vaccine may be able to come out, is that we will probably be in a COVID state for the next 6, 12 months, 18 months, through potentially the end of 2021. Now, that doesn't mean that we will continue to have everything shut down. I think as we learn more about the disease, as we improve contact tracing, as we really are able to determine, where the disease spreads and exactly how it spreads, we're going to have much better regulations, and frankly, more exact regulations, so that hopefully we can see more businesses opening up, more venues opening up, really provide an opportunity to return much more to normal life. In terms of the debrief with end of session, obviously COVID and the wildfires remain very, very much top of mind. As you can see, We know wildfires are very natural. What makes these wildfires sort of the last couple of years so challenging are, one is sort of pent up dead wood in the forest. We've had more and more people moving out into the closer to forest or actually in the forest. And so what we end up doing is when there are fires, we put them out immediately rather than letting them naturally burn, which is what you would have happen in a more natural environment. So I think we do have to look at doing more prescribed burns around the state to really manage these forests better. The other piece is climate. Climate change is real. There's really no scientific data refuting that, and you're seeing the governor and the legislature really taking some positions to ensure that California continues to lead in terms of climate and really making sure that we're protecting our environment so that we can do our part around climate change, and hopefully we can influence the rest of the country to do the same. So those are some of the two of the major issues. I would say just in terms of other issues that are sort of hot button thoughts is, before we had the pandemic, the biggest issue we were talking about was housing and homelessness. In some of your communities, you may feel that issue. In some of your communities, you may not, depending on where you're located in the state. But housing and homelessness are still very much top of mind. The homelessness situation has probably gotten worse because we haven't been able to house as many folks in temporary shelters, because temporary shelters are very crowded and people come and go. And so it's difficult to ensure that you don't have people coming in or leaving with COVID. And so because of that, you've probably seen more people out on the streets. And so we know that we have to build more housing, we have to build more supportive housing. So those issues continue to remain very much top of mind.
Thank you, Assemblyman Ting. So a question did come in, and this might I'm sure will come up again with our next speaker as well. Does Assemblyman Ting have any insights into caddies making a return to San Francisco County?
Oh, that's a great question. I actually don't. Every county, so we have state regulations, which are seen as kind of a floor for the regulations. But every county can continue to remain more stringent based on their own county guidelines. So I'm happy to reach out to the city and see what they say. But again, all of that is really up to each individual county health officer. So even the mayor doesn't have complete authority in that realm. It's really up to the county health officers to make that determination.
So, Assemblyman, I know that you play. And I know that you play well too. So how often have you been able to get out, and where have you been playing?
I don't get to play nearly enough. I have 2 young children, so they keep me pretty busy. So unfortunately, if you look at my index, it's, maybe I'm lucky to get out 10, 12 times a year. I'm lucky that I get to play in San Francisco. I'll play both at Harding Park or at the Olympic Club. Or at all different venues around the Bay Area. And then when I'm in Sacramento, I'll play some of the different the city public courses, whether it's Hagen Oaks or Bing Maloney. I've played Ansel Hoffman, as well as Teal Bend. So some of the various courses all around Sacramento. We're very lucky in California, especially Northern California in particular, to be blessed with so many different great playing options in every community that we live in. So I'm lucky to have that. I wish we were having this meeting on a golf course rather than over a webinar.
And I'm sure soon we will. All things considered, let's hope that next year we are doing exactly that. And
Absolutely.
So can't thank you enough for taking your time. Again, I'm grateful for the relationship. And we know what we know, but certainly to get to the PGA, and even now, times being what they are as we head to a national election, there are very difficult decisions being made, and so thank you for that and your leadership here in Northern California and spending your time with us this morning.
Thanks so much, Len. Really appreciate you having me, and thanks again for all your hard work on the PGA Championship. It was a really wonderful partnership, and I'm really glad we could pull it off, because I knew, even a month or two before that, it looked very doubtful. But I'm very thankful that we were able to get a great event out together and to work so closely with the PGA. So thanks for everybody for being here.
Thank you. Best to you and your family. Be safe.
Take care.
Thank you, Assembly Member.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, next up, the Caddie Now founder and CEO, Dave Cavassa. Dave, thank you so much for joining us this morning. And the topic we'll start with, Dave's going to discuss AB 2257 and its impact on caddies and the caddy industry. Dave, again, thank you for joining us from Virginia. Hope that you're doing well, and we look forward to our discussion.
Thank you, Len. Just want to make sure, can you hear me okay?
Yes, very well.
Oh,
very well.
Okay, great. So just a quick point of introduction. Again, David Cavosa from Caddie Now. We founded the company Caddie Now about 6 years ago with the concept of bringing caddies back to the game. And then we've noticed over the last several years, obviously the state of California trying to do some very interesting things around independent contractor law to really affect great caddy programs that have been and are being run throughout the state of California. And even further, unfortunately, we've seen other states around the country, specifically on the East Coast, start to look at what California has been doing with independent contractor law and making similar changes to follow. So when AB 5 was passed just over a year ago, and even prior to that, when the Dynamex case in the California Supreme Court happened, we've been watching it very closely, given that we run several caddy programs in the state. And up until that point, all of the caddies were independent contractors, just like they had been for the past, we'll say, 100 years throughout the country. That's the way caddy programs have always traditionally been run, as independent contractors. I have the benefit, I'll say, of having a previous career prior to starting Caddie Now as a state and federal lobbyist as well here in Washington, D.C. And seeing some of these actions taken in California really concerned us. And I knew that eventually lawsuits would start to happen, whether they were from the state level or from the caddies themselves. So we took a step over a year ago and said, you know what, we're going to do this the right way. We're going to do it 100% in compliance with the law and not try to skate along the edges. So we made all of our caddies employees just about a year ago. And it was not a fun process at all. I'm sure that many folks on this webinar who had caddy programs probably looked at that similarly and had a similar difficult decision to make. Some decided to make that move and some didn't, but we just decided, listen, if we're going to do this, we're going to protect the clubs, we're going to protect the caddies, we're going to protect the golfer and do it right. Not a fun process. Now, the good news again here is, out of the blue, AB 2257 was passed just about a month ago and already signed into law. We were not expecting this. We weren't expecting to see anything for quite some time that was going to change this provision of AB 5, but we were obviously very happy to see that law passed. As Craig Kessler's probably already shared with you all, a gut and replacement bill for AB 5. But the big reason that I'm here to talk to you today is the effect it has on caddying specifically. And there's now specific language in that bill that has been passed and signed calling out caddying as being exempt from the AB 5, what's called ABC test, as long as it's being run, that caddy program or that caddy situation is being run through a referral agency. And we'll talk a bit more about that. It doesn't do anything to change caddies that are still working directly for the club. Unfortunately, as independent contractors, then AB 5 and the ABC test still remains intact. But when working through a referral agency, there's now this carve out, which is really a great carve out. We can go to the next slide here. So what is a referral agency? This pulled some of this language directly from the bill, but a referral agency can act on behalf of what they call service providers, i.e. caddies, under contract with the club to provide services to the club's customers or members. The service providers, i.e. the caddies in this case, remain independent contractors as long as they contract through a referral agency and have a IC agreement with the referral agency. That's a key piece of this. Otherwise, again, they would be considered direct, having a direct relationship with the club or the member, and then AB 5, i.e. the ABC test, applies again. The other thing is that these service providers or caddies still need to satisfy some of the key tenets of what we call the Referral test, which most of you probably have never heard of and consider yourself lucky. But the Referral test is a much more reasonable way of deciding whether someone is really an independent contractor or an employee of the entity that they're working for. And it comes down to a number of factors, and it's a weighting of multiple factors rather than with the ABC test. It was a pass-fail. You either passed all 3 tenets of the ABC test or you failed. The good news is with Referral, these are just a handful of the key factors. There's actually 10 or 11 factors. These are the key ones. As long as the caddy and the referral agency cover these areas on the most part, then the caddy would be considered an independent contractor. That is the good news. There's quite a bit more that if anybody's interested, they can look up around Referral and around AB 2257. Craig Kessler is a great resource on this as well. And then, of course, we're here as well to comment on this. We've had to become black belts on California state labor law over the last 5 years. Last slide, if you don't mind going to the next one. So how does this relate to your caddies and your caddy program? Again, AB5 turned all caddies into employees. Bad. Now the clubs have a chance to reevaluate their risk. And now with AB 2257, this is really great news, is that you can now go back to or stay independent contractor based. All you really required to do via this law is to engage a third-party referral agency under contract. Now, Caddie now happens to be a referral agency as it's described in the law. There are other players out there as well that can do this. Caddie now is not the only one. Kind of closing thoughts, and this is what I call commentary. This isn't legal opinion or advice. This is more my view based on everything I've seen. So when I look at the 3 types of clubs out there that have caddy programs, number one, if a club has caddies today and they're already employees of the club, you're still safe. I'll tell you that you now have another option, a very much less expensive option to have your caddies now as independent contractors and not have all of the costs associated, as you can imagine, and red tape associated with having those caddies as employees, Affordable Care Act, workers' comp, and tax load. If the club has caddies today and they're still ICs directly to the club, or that the club has no contract in place with the caddy and the caddy's just showing up de facto, I would tell you that you're not safe. This is my opinion, and that you really should look at this law as a really good piece of news for you. And you now have some options to comply very easily and very inexpensively. And then I'll say there are app-based caddy companies out there that just provide apps, and the golfers can book caddies through an app. Our read of the situation is that really does not constitute a referral agency unless the caddies are being signed up as independent contractors to that app company, and unless that app company is in fact protecting the caddies through additional services like indemnification to the club and then providing insurance for the caddies, or requiring the caddies to carry their own occupational accident insurance. That's kind of a quick drive-by for me. There's a lot I covered there in a short period of time, but wanted to keep it short and sweet, and pause here for a moment and see if there are any questions or comments. And please, Tom and Len, let me know if there's anything I didn't cover that you'd like me to cover.
So Dave, thank you for that, and certainly good news, and as we are searching for our carve out, if you will, which started with AB5 and the business exemption for our teaching professionals, but we seem to be getting there. So right at the end, Dave, I think you said the magic word, which is indemnification. So in working through a referral agency, just again to make it as simple, I guess, as possible, the caddies are with the referral agency. The agreement with the club is with the referral agency, and therefore, given the complexities of California employment law and such, the club would be really pretty much totally indemnified because of the relationship with the referral agency who has the relationship with the service providers. Is that roundabout enough? Is that everything's covered?
Yeah, Yeah, that's a great question. So let me expand on that, because you bring up a very important point, which is that I'm very much biased here, so you're hearing this from a biased opinion, of course. We indemnify the club. Any club that we contract with, we indemnify the club, the staff, and the members 100%. So that if anything were to happen after that contract is signed between the caddies and the club or a member, including personal injury, wrongful termination, misclassification, Caddie now steps in and indemnifies the club and defends the club and the membership completely on their behalf. That is key, and that's what we do. Others do not do that. So my advice to you all is that if you do decide to head down this referral agency path, make sure that the referral agency you sign with indemnifies the club completely. Number two, which you didn't ask, but let me also add to that, Len, is that we also require the caddies and connect them with what's called occupational accident insurance. It's like a workers' comp policy for an independent contractor, because you can't cover them under workers' comp. And that OCAC policy is key, so that if that caddy does get hurt while on property, they now have their own accident coverage. And we connect them with that provider, and then we withhold basically $1 a bag and give that to the insurance company every month on the caddie's behalf. So for $1 a bag, now the club, the golfer, the caddy, everybody's covered for personal injury. And that's not the case today at most clubs that have IC caddy programs. All these caddies are just operating at their own risk. So I'm glad you brought that up. Hopefully that answers your question.
It does, Dave. Thank you. Thank you. And again, it just, particularly with the speed with which this particular legislation came out, AB 2257, hit the table and then was approved very, very quickly. So as I say, from an industry standpoint, it seems as though we're certainly moving in the right direction on a number of these initiatives. And Dave, I don't think I see any questions. Bryce, do you see? Is there something you might see that I don't?
Yeah, I see one right here, Len. Does the caddy now take responsibility for training and IC drug testing?
We do, if the club would like those, additional provisions, right? It's not something that we offer as a standard. Most clubs want to run their own caddy program still. They want to recruit and train and certify. So we'll allow the clubs to do that, and we'll just act as a referral agency. But for the clubs that have asked us, hey, we want you to do drug testing or require that your IC caddies be drug tested, absolutely, we implement that. And for the clubs that say, hey, Dave, we would like you to help us build or grow the caddy program, that's what we do for a living. We recruit and certify caddies all day, every day. So absolutely, we do that.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dave. Thank you for spending your time with us, and we'll carry on and stay in touch, and appreciate you being here. Good luck. Stay safe as well, because the pandemic is everywhere. So we're really grateful, as Tom mentioned early on, for the success the industry is having, and as long as we keep behaving, if you will, that will continue. So thank you so much, Dave.
Thank you, Len.
Dave, thanks.
Okay, we'll turn it over to our Southern California Golf Association Director of Government Affairs, Craig Kessler. Craig, there's so much going on. Propositions, right? 15, 22, AB5, AB 2257. We have a national election coming up, and so much more. So it's all yours, Craig. Thank you for being here once again.
Well, thanks, Len. Thanks, Tom. Thanks to the two sections for inviting me back. Just before I get into some of those gruesome things, AB 2257, which is not gruesome, actually, it was quite unexpectedly pleasant in many regards, and I'll focus on the PGA professionals in just a moment. But I want to tag on to a couple of comments that Assembly Member Ting made. First of all, I doubt that the Assembly member remembers it, but we met in Los Angeles about 6-7 years ago and had a conversation. We met through a mutual friend. And it turned out that he and I are graduates of the same intermediate school. I'm not going to mention which one that is or where it is in the state, but I did at that time discover quite pleasantly that he's almost a lifelong golfer and a pretty accomplished one and understands our game, and is someone who works in governmental affairs and deals with water districts and planning departments and city councils and halls of administration, and yes, even legislators at times. It makes a difference when somebody plays the game and understands the game. They don't need an entire briefing to before they know what you're talking about and what it means in practical terms. So we're always lucky to have in Sacramento those who understand and, as you could clearly tell from his comments, have a love of the game like everybody on this call. I'd also add that next year in the southern part of the state, we have a major championship at a municipal golf course, Torrey Pines, which already for 55 years has hosted an annual tour stop. And I hope, yes, this state has magnificent municipal facilities capable of hosting national championships like Harding Park and Torrey Pines. But let's not forget the Lincoln Parks and the Sharp Parks in San Francisco, or the Mission Bays, or the Balboas in San Diego. Those are the meat and potatoes every day of our game and of your profession. I won't call them the feeders. They're better than that, but they're part of what sustains our industry on a day-to-day basis. So I think the way I like to characterize my actual substantive remarks is that this has been a curious year, to say the least. And I think everyone on this call will probably was thinking the same thing I was thinking back in early March, that with all of the existential challenges that the golf industry was facing, all of a sudden coming to the realization that we were about to engage a pandemic, the likes of which we haven't really seen. Well, nobody who's alive who's ever seen it, because the last one was the Spanish flu of 1918, 19, and into 1920, having no experience. Suddenly we were all out of our golf courses, out of our offices, sheltering in place at home, or stay safer at home, whatever the nomenclature may have been for each particular jurisdiction, not knowing if and when we would get back to playing golf, teaching golf, maintaining golf courses, even in some cases at the beginning, whether we'd be permitted to maintain those golf courses. And not to mention, I, above all, more so than anyone at that point, once the legislature went out of session for the same reasons that we went out of business, all of our hopes on AB 5 to better perfect the business-to-business for professional services exemption, which covers PGA professionals, not quite perfectly, but pretty well in 2019, but we were going to perfect it in 2020. We didn't even put caddies on the table. We were cautioning to forget it. But in so many ways, we did get together. We brought golf back. We made the case very effectively, very early, and golf was literally the first activity that came back. I know I can speak definitively in Southern California counties. It came back before parks did, before hiking trails, walking beaches, many other things. And we never, and even when it came back, I don't think anyone could have predicted that we'd be coming back with numbers, play numbers that we haven't seen since the 1990s. I hope everyone received the NGF's latest update. I think it was yesterday, it might have been the day before, which indicates that it's not just a honeymoon. We're still looking at saw 21% nationally of August 2020 over August 2019. And those numbers reflect what we saw in June and July as well. So it seems as if that Providence has given us through a pandemic and through something that otherwise no one would have ever wished, an opportunity, and I'll get back to that a moment, that we never would have dreamed of coming out of that. And that's a little bit of a prelude into my discussion today, and I won't go into as much detail as I did a couple of weeks ago on AB 2257, and I won't go into the detail that David Cavosa just went into specifically from the Caddie aspect, in large part because he covered it quite adequately. I'll simply say, as the SCGA put out in a report a couple of weeks ago, it did create, through referral agencies, a very definite route for caddying at resorts and private clubs through a mechanism, through a third-party referral mechanism that you heard in some detail today. What David didn't refer to, and is probably of more interest to this audience because most of you are PGA golf professionals, is that, again, to our surprise, some of those provisions of the 12-prong test that's in the business-to-business exemption were improved. 2 out of the 3 of them were improved in a way that came as a very pleasant surprise through a gut and amend process. There is still a 12th one that requires a little bit more perfection, but I would think that based on events, we should be encouraged that we can finish that job off in 2021. Something else that the SCGA, for those who get those governmental reports, will probably in the next few days put together in some detail is to share with you a Los Angeles Times editorial this week, ironically an editorial that encourages a no vote on Prop 22. Prop 22 is Uber and Lyft's and Postmates and DoorDash's initiative that gives them and only them a special exemption within AB 5 to pursue independent contracting with a number of what they call protections. Los Angeles Times didn't find the protections all that protecting, and maybe one of the many reasons that they're encouraging a no vote. But within that editorial, basically, it hews very closely to what we've been saying from the beginning, and to, I think, the route that all of our organizations, and particularly the California Alliance for Golf, pursued, which wasn't to get into an either or black or white debate between a universe in which everything is employee or everything is independent contractor. And I think what you're seeing, and I think what the LA Times was almost briefing for, was that middle position that in continental Europe is called a dependent contractor. And I think what the Times almost created was a powerful argument, not from the political right, because most of the criticisms of AB 5 have been from the political right, which means that in Sacramento, no one pays attention to it. But the Los Angeles Times is coming from a center-left position, in essence explaining that AB 5 is deeply flawed, and evidence of that is all the changes that have come since its passage. And they indicated what I've been saying from the beginning, that it's really the California Supreme Court, as David Cavoso, I think, very eloquently stated, created, in an attempt to root out what I think most would agree were some scofflaw companies that just simply one day woke up and took employees and made them independent contractors and decided to save on labor expenses, tax expenses, and all other kinds of expenses, many of which went to the state. But in an effort to do that, overturned a Borrello test, which was the leading test since 1989 in the state for determining employee versus independent contracting status. And it's a 11-prong test, but it isn't either or black and white. It's a combination of the 11 factors, which in some cases opens the door maybe to scofflaws to try to slip into those interstitials. But on the other hand, when you're dealing with something as complicated as trying to get well into the 21st century in the world's 5th largest economy, and one of the reasons that California is the world's 5th largest economy is because we are with the center almost in the world of the technology that has launched us and made us the 5th largest economy and created a lot of possibilities of much greater flexibility. So with all of that happening, I think it bodes even better that if the legislature can actually be in session in 2021 and we can get into it, into some meetings and not just have Zoom conferences and not have the legislature go constantly out of session when there's some positive COVID-19 tests, I think we can finish that off. But having said that, if most management groups, most employee groups, most ownership groups in the state found the 2019 version of AB 5 and its business-to-business exception adequate to shift the business model and shift some of the terms to continue with independent contracting PGA teaching, which is so important, not just to many on listening in this conversation. It's important because that's what you do for a living, but to the entire golf industry. it is the model which provides excellent teaching at mostly municipal facilities. And but for independent contracting, that would not continue to be true. And I know that the SCGA has done, periodically does a lot of surveying of its members and its facilities. And we always come up with two things that finish 1 and 2 to get people to play more golf. And it's if they had somebody to play with and if they played better. Well, the somebody to play with is sort of the role of an amateur association. Playing better is entirely the passion of PGA teaching professionals. So if we lose half of that, the industry itself loses quite a bit. And by the way, that particular argument, along with the fact that independent contracting PGA professionals make a very fine living, was probably what most impressed Assemblymember Gonzalez when we met with her in her downtown San Diego office to sort of seek a little bit of input on some of the particulars that went into the business-to-business exception. So I think everything, I guess the theme of my talk today is that everything is, all our dire predictions turned out to be wrong, thank God, and things are much, much better than we thought, and particularly from a governmental perspective, moving forward. I think they're going to be things are going to be substantially better than many had predicted. Having said that, let me also suggest that opportunities such as this 21% increase that's driven in very much, not entirely, but in large part by the fact that persons who maybe golf never attracted and lost to other activities, they had nowhere else to go. It's an outdoor activity, and as one of the guests on this particular chat said a few months ago, golf was almost designed for COVID-19. It's a perfectly safe activity. Well, we've attracted them, and based upon particularly the municipal systems I talked to, where they're really kicking it is on those little 9-hole golf courses, the 3-pars, the developmental facilities, the starter facilities that are attracting people who have never played or played so little before they really weren't core golfers or proficient golfers. We have them captured, and we're going to have them captured for a bit longer. So this is a little bit my sort of shot out there to my own organization, to the ones on the phone here, and all the rest of them. It's incumbent upon golf to huddle and come up with some strategies to keep as much of that as we can. I think we can do it. And then I think the last couple of years where we saw little tiny green shoots of slight growth, but we were all rightly concerned that would they be, set back by the recession that was inevitable? Well, we are in that recession, and that will continue to pose problems for us. But in essence, we have this flood of play because they have nothing else to do. Well, since they've discovered they've discovered what everyone on this call knows, and the assembly member knows, that it's a great game, and there's something enduringly attractive about it. And particularly as municipalities, because they were forced to do 10 and 12 minute tee intervals, suddenly they have restored the value proposition of the 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3 o'clock tee time. Because I don't know about the rest of you, but the buzz I've heard the most of is I played at so-and-so fill in the blank busy municipal golf course, teed off at 1 o'clock and came off the course at 5 o'clock. And suddenly that an experiment that everyone was forced to run, but couldn't be persuaded to run. I'm sure many persons on this call were like me, desperately persuading municipal systems to give this a shot. You might like what you see. Suddenly forced to do it, I think many of them have liked what they've seen. And I've heard from many large municipal systems that they will never go back to the old ways of doing something. So that's some other positive that came out of something that's otherwise tragic in its scope. And that we're going to need to, take advantage of that opportunity, work together, and do some things. Because the existential challenges that we were worried about on March 1st of 2020 still remain. Golf is still expensive. It's still a water-dependent activity. It is still, in terms, we are very vulnerable in the sense that there's a direct relationship between encumbering a lot of open space, and we can't play our game without, in urban areas, a lot of open space. And remember, the assembly member talked about, when he was talking about the issues, housing shortages, which ultimately down the pipeline leads to homelessness, is an acute problem and probably the number one problem if you do polling persons in the state. Well, there's that vulnerability. So it's also incumbent on the golf industry to translate that increased play into making clear that there is an incredible societal value in so many ways, including and get away from the economic value, talk about the societal value, the open space value, the ecological value, so we continue to make a case for the use of large tracts of acreage in urban areas in which there's incredible competition for that use. Competition, whether it's housing, whether it's commerce, whatever it may be, and increasingly from other recreational activities. And as an aside, maybe we ought to sit down and talk to the U.S. Tennis Association when they come here, that in California, we don't invade each other's turf and territory, particularly because every survey I've ever seen of utilization in the state's large cities always ranks golf number one and tennis the last. And yet that's never caused anyone to do a raid on the tennis courts, at least from our community and from other recreational communities. Sorry for that aside. And for those of you who are in probably the southwestern part of LA County know where I'm coming from in that particular remark, and I'll go no further. So let me kind of wrap up. I've been a little bit all over the map, trying to touch a number of subjects, but 6 months ago, things that looked very, very dire, I hope everyone understands they look considerably better, which gives us an opportunity to make them even better than that as we emerge from COVID-19, which we eventually will at some point, but also recognize that in some other respects where yours truly, and I led the class in lowering expectations, maybe that's a good thing. We really outpunched our weight by a considerable amount, and that should give us cause to take a second look at why that happened. Some of it was dumb luck, and like I've always said, never discount the role that dumb luck plays in the success of anything. But I don't think it was all dumb luck. I think some of it was the fact that in this state, unlike so many other places in this country, all of golf's organizations long ago got together, pulled together. Now we pulled together because we thought we were facing existential crises and problems, and we were. But the very act of coming together has allowed someone like me who predicted so many dire things to end up being wrong. And I like nothing better than to be wrong when I'm predicting a bad outcome. So I don't know whether I shed more light on the situation right now than heat, or more heat than light, or whether I raised questions or didn't raise any questions. But with that, again, I'll thank Len, Tom, the two sections, for inviting this fellow from an amateur association to be with you every couple of weeks and have a bully pulpit and to try to inform. That's my goal anyway. I don't know if I always achieve it. So thank you, and I will turn the microphone, as it were, back to you.
So thank you, Craig. And with your guidance, this has been far beyond dumb luck. This has been a skilled resources and a skilled approach to a moving target in its best case. So thank you for everything. Craig, I was going to toss out what's next, and you started to hit on it in terms of coming up with strategies. And these are strategies to sustain, strategies to keep riding this wave as we have new players and rounds are up, and facilities both in California, Nevada, and all over the country are still slammed. So Craig, those strategies, do we look at those as continued safety measures? Do we look at those as continuing our relationships with our local legislatures and our health officials, or all of those things? So yeah, I know you just mentioned it and we haven't given it much thought yet, but again, the pursuit of those strategies, what does it look like to you at the moment? What do they look like to you at the moment?
I've given it a little bit more thought than you think. I think the minimum, we must be safe in everything we do. We must stay on the good side of every public health officer in every county in the state and be exemplary in our performance and adherence to all the rules. Many of you know that we've We've tangled a little bit with one large county in the state in particular on some of their, and we're not the only ones, but we've always made clear that we will always follow the rules, whatever they are. If we disagree with the rules, we may make an argument to change them, but if we don't succeed in that argument, we'll follow. And I think that's a given. And beyond that, obviously, all the things, and these are PGA professionals mostly on the call, do all the things you do well and keep doing them. But I think if there's one thing we haven't done very well, is a full-throated media campaign or a messaging campaign, or I prefer to call them narratives, that really explains what I closed with. That makes the case for our game, not just because it's a great game, but because we add to communities at all levels. And that means not just that we've been a little bit better with the environmental side, we've been a lot better with the environmental side, but something Assemblymember Ting pointed out, and he focused on something that I incessantly focus on. Most 70% of the golf played in the United States is public. More than 1 out of 5 golf courses in California are owned by governments. So we haven't done well on making clear that the game is deeply immersed in the public sector, and that we bring value to the public sector and we bring value to all those communities. Yes, and I come from an amateur association in which we're nothing more than 1,500 golf clubs, and they range from sites for national championships to driving range facilities that teach the game. And they're both extremely important in the ecosystem of golf. And I think because we all love great golf courses, we tend to focus on that. But somehow we need to get down and focus in the weeds on those things that are a part of the that wouldn't be the top of the ecosystem if it weren't for the constant engine and I want to call it the bottom, because that indicates there's a value difference between the two, and I don't think there is. But we need to get out there and explain those values and so forth. And my experience has been that where we have done that, where we've had programming, and I speak experience mostly on the ground in the southern part of the state, has often made the difference between a little bit tired municipal facility that's in the community where we want to grow this game, and where someone suggests maybe we should close it because its time has passed and golf is passé and it's not popular. Everyone knows all those stupid things. That oftentimes, if you can make the case that there is, whether it's the Southern Cal Golf Association or the SCPGA or anyone else, has been doing program and connecting particularly the kids in that community with that public golf course in the community, the golf course continues. And where that doesn't happen, it doesn't continue. And I think in a larger level, and it's probably beyond, we all have contacts with our national organizations. I'll say it here with the tape running, and I'm sure I'll bother somebody or offend someone, or I'll hill back on this. Golf is behind other games, activities, and sports, and recognizing the need, because we had it so good for so long, in recognizing the need to bring real money and resources to public-private partnerships. If we expect to harvest this bounty that tragic circumstances has given us, and we expect to continue to be resonant in communities and continue to make the case for using a lot of open acreage that could be used for something else, our national groups will either recognize the need to do this. It'll take them a time, but the proverbial saying, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. We need to take that first step and get moving in that direction. Or long after the three of us that right now are gone, golf won't be the game, and won't be the game that we want it to be, with the reach we want to have it and the size we want to have it. Sorry for the speech, but I had a tendency to do that before you invited me on the program. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, Craig, thank you. I appreciate the comment of, continue to be exemplary in all of our actions, and certainly continue the community engagement. So one step at a time, as you say, day by day, we're getting there. And just to check in, Bryce, Any questions or comments for Craig?
Not seeing anything in here.
Okay, thank you. So Craig, thank you. And our thanks to Assembly Member Ting, Dave Cavassa, Craig, and Kevin, of course. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Tom Addis. Tom?
Yeah, thanks, Len, and thanks, everybody. Craig, you and Kevin Heaney, you're much more than an amateur association, the SCGA. You're a partner to all of us, and we can't, we continue to try, but we can't express our appreciation for what you do out there on our behalf, whether it's through California Alliance for Golf or through each of our associations. I think it's admirable, and please continue. You're the best, and we appreciate you very, very much. Speaking of one more bit of appreciation, I noticed that Carol Pence is listening in, and I believe this was said a couple of weeks ago, but again, remind everybody, Carol is retiring at the end of the year from her position as one of our PGA of America career consultants, primarily up in Northern California, and our own Ken Farrell's partner up there. So Carol, thanks for being on all of the calls, and thanks for a great opportunity to work with you as a partner as well. So a lot has been said today, and I couldn't agree more with Craig on the messaging campaign that golf really needs to inject what we do and what the game and sport and activity means to so many people. And we lead in safety, we lead in the activity, and we need to continue to do that as we go forward. And we need to point that out a little bit more, in fact, a lot more. And I'm proud to be a part of it, and I think all of us are. So we shall work on that. Everybody, hopefully, as our responsibility calls, we must stay safe out there. There's a lot going on. Keep setting the example, and we just appreciate all of you. So, Len, thank you very much. And we look forward to a couple of weeks from now.
Thanks so much, Tom. And again, to everyone, we are where we are and have the success because of Craig and because of all of us on the call, but certainly, it stands out that Carol, who has been with the section and with the industry for so long. Thank you. And Ken and Tom, Nikki, Bryce, Tyler, Caitlin for our production team, and of course, Presidents Moriarty and Latendre. We thank everyone for being with us today. It's Friday again. Winds are expected throughout, sounds like the state of California this weekend. Please be as careful as you can, and we'll look forward again to being together in 2 weeks. Thank you so much. Be safe, and of course, please stay in touch with us.
Hi, everybody.